sports 24/7. Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And for the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. And that's just a sampling. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. For laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, download the Roku app. National Streaming Sports, live and on demand, sports talk for America.
Football season is here, and SeatGeek is my go-to for buying tickets. Now, with SeatGeek, every single ticket is backed with their buyer guarantee. We've all had plans change, and when you can't make it to the big game, SeatGeek has you covered. They're the only ticketer that allows you to return your tickets ahead of the event for credit with SeatGeek swaps. So when things come up, I know that my tickets won't go to waste. So what are you waiting for? Download the SeatGeek app to maximize your possibilities and shop live events with confidence.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
Welcome to Glove Fist, and we're back. My name is Frank Latirzo, full-time fight observer, and based on the last 2 months, I would say outstanding to excellent football prognosticator. Tonight, I am joined by co-host, Mr. Happy himself, Jack Hirsch. Jack, you remember the Johnny Carson show?
Of course.
Okay. I think his most famous guest was Don Rickles. And Carson, or the guess he had the most.
Don Rickles was more famous than Muhammad Ali.
But I meant to say his most frequent guest, where the show is hysterical. And Johnny Carson called Don Rickles Mr. Warmth. And I could see you back in your day boxing coming out with a robe that said Mr. Warmth on the back.
It said
because you look like your smile looks like you really don't want to smile, but you know it's the thing to do, so you do it.
No, I mean, you got to cover up for me, Frank, because you forced me into a Super Bowl prediction before I wanted to make one. So I picked the Chiefs to beat the Eagles, but you're my witness. I texted you before the game, the morning of the game, saying the Eagles were going to win 31-20. So if you don't cover for me, and you
Jack,
what are you talking about, Jack? I didn't get any.
You did, Jack, and I
think I picked the Chiefs.
No, you picked look, all that matters is before the game, you pick the Eagles. Now, look, we pick fights on Monday night sometimes, and I may make a pick on a Monday night, and by the time the weigh-in comes around, I see it different because you just get a vibe, and that's what happened to you. But this year, for some reason, Jack, I don't know what it was. Maybe because I dislike both teams so much, but I just had this voice in my ear saying, Frank, Ohio State is winning the championship, and if you bet on their games, you will build up a little pile of cash. So when the NFL playoffs start, you can throw that on the Eagles, and in the best case scenario, the Eagles will be in the Super Bowl, and they'll be a slight underdog because you know they're great as an underdog, and you can bet the Eagles, getting points that you won't need because they will win the game outright. And every bet I made on college football this year and every playoff college football and NFL, Jack, I happened to get it right. Now, look, most of my bets were on, well, the NFL bets were all on the Eagles. I bet a couple other games besides Ohio State. Like I loved Michigan over Alabama. And there was another one I liked a lot that I won. And then I just let it all ride on the game yesterday. I had no doubt, Jack, that the Eagles, it was their year. They were going to get revenge for the game they lost 2 years ago. They're clearly the best organization in the NFL, and they're clearly the best team in the NFL. And that performance yesterday was daunting. I never felt the Chiefs were in the game.
Well, with the money you won, I know you're going to buy a motorcycle. Are you going to get the same exact motorcycle that Smoking Joe Frazier drove?
The one I have now is almost like that, so it's going to be different. But, you know, Yank Durham did not like Joe riding bikes at all. And he did fall and he fell once. I know where he got scuffed up a little bit, but I think he fell more than once. But, Jack, I was into motorcycles. I got my first motorcycle, I think, in 1969 when I was about 10 years old. So I've loved motorcycles. Cars, motorcycles, football, and boxing have always been my passion. So, anyhow, did you enjoy the game? Where did you watch it?
No, of course I watched the game from beginning to end, and then I watched the post-game festivities.
I couldn't do that.
I can't stay in front of the TV all day to hear what's going on. This. They overanalyze it. It drives you crazy.
I watched no pregame.
6 hours before the game. You know, the game starts 6:30. So come 5:30, the TV's going to be on, and I'll have to lead up. Because I watch certain sports shows now and then before the game, you know, to hear. But they overanalyze things a little too much. And it's an event. There's nothing like the Super Bowl. I'm going to tell you, nothing quite compares to it unless you get a mega fight. I mean, when I say mega fight, the type of fight that's going to take place once every 10 years, that'll exceed a Super Bowl game. Like an Ali Frazier fight is going to be not the third one, actually.
Right.
Certainly the first one's bigger than any Super Bowl game, not even close. And even the second one was bigger than the Super Bowl game. A Leonard Hearns, the first fight. You know, there's such anticipation. Maybe even Cooney Holmes to a degree. You know, everyone is really psyched for that. But
Jack, if you think about it, I know we like to blend the two. They do have a common problem. It's not a big problem, and maybe because we're on the other side of 50 that we see it that way. But I don't like when fights start at 12:30 on a Saturday night. And the same thing, Jack. Weren't the Packers and the Chiefs the first Super Bowl? Like, I think the first 5 or 6, didn't they start at like 2 or 3 o'clock?
Exactly. But now the NFL does it perfectly. The game begins about 6:40, so the game's going to end about 10 o'clock, a little after 10 or whatever. So people who have work the next day, I mean, they can manage it, you know.
But, Jack, you said they do it perfectly. I look at it the other way, that they soak up every minute of money they can make. And if they don't start the game by 6:30, they might as well not have it. But the game would I would enjoy it more if it was Saturday night and started at like 7 or 8 o'clock. But why would they do that? Because then they lose a whole day if they if they had it on Saturday.
Well,
but it'll never change.
I'd like to see them start the Super Bowl possibly just a little bit earlier. When I said it could end after 10:30. I'm thinking of the people who have work the next day. You know, it'd be really nice if the game ended around 9 o'clock. But you talk about Mayweather-Pacquiao, that came on like 1 o'clock or so. I was at a show at the Barclays Center. I may have told you this story. I forgot who headlined it, but one of the fighters was going to be, a fighter from Long Island, put it that way, who I was interested in seeing. And his fight, never didn't come on till about 1:45 in the night. And I remember leaving at 1:06 because I stretched it out, 1:06 at night. And I thought for sure he's coming on, 2 fights left. He didn't come on. And I spoke to him later. I said, well, what did you do as far as staying up? You must have been starving, not having eaten in a while. And he was saying how rough it was just to get into the ring, let alone the fight, to just go through with it at that time. But Mayweather Pacquiao, starting 1 o'clock on a Saturday night? And a funny thing, I was at a fight show once, and I'm sitting next to Randy Gordon. I remember telling his lovely wife, Ronnie, how ridiculously late these fights begin. And she sent him a text, and Randy laughed. He showed me. Must have been about 12:20 in the evening. And his wife said, yeah, Jack Hirsch is right. This is ridiculous how late it starts. A Deontay Wilder fight. And that's the thing with boxing. These late starts, turn people off. It really does. But then the argument is, well, what about the West Coast, the 3 hours earlier? Come on, they'll just see the fight today. Frank, we're going to have in a couple of weeks, okay, a great boxing show led by Better Beef Bival. Phenomenal boxing show. We can't wait for it, but it's going to start something like about 1 in the afternoon approximately, our time, East Coast time. And that's great. If it started 10 in the morning our time, that would be great. You just put the time aside. And I
like the fights when they're in Saudi like that. I like that we get them early. And I like when they're in the UK, too, that they're over early, too, by 8 o'clock.
Frank, at the end of football discussion, do the Eagles repeat next year? Does Ohio State repeat? And then we'll move on to boxing.
Yes, they both repeat. The Eagles have a better chance than Ohio State, but I think they both repeat, and I will make a futures bet on both of them. And in closing out the football, I see that Mr. Eagle himself, Joe Bergman, is on. Joe, I love you. As I said, the Chiefs are the most annoying team. The Eagles are the most annoying fans, but you are not one of them. Enjoy it, buddy. It's been a long time. I know that you bet a couple dollars too, and that you did well. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'm sure I'll get ribbed a lot. And when I get the new bike, I'll bring it back by and show you.
Joe is puzzled. He saw where I posted something, or commented on one of your posts or whatever, picking the Eagles to win, and he said, "Didn't you say the Chiefs are going to win on Club Fist?" So I felt like saying to Joe, I'm like a politician. I say one thing in the North, the other thing in the South. I'll cover my tracks. But for the record, I'm glad I put that down. And
no, Jack, you picked it right. And look, I am not going to. I'm saying it right now, and we're going to talk about this. I am not going to pick a winner in the Canelo Crawford fight because I can't be objective, and I know that. And I don't. You can milk me in your mouth all you want. I'm not making the pick, Jack, because I will not be correct. I'll look to make every case for Crawford, but at the end of the day, I'll try to put the Maloiks on Canelo, so I'll pick him. I don't want to make a pick.
Frank, I'm going to make a pick in a couple of weeks. And it's going to help me make a pick? The Israel Madrimov, Virgil Ortiz fight.
Which I'm looking forward to very much.
A great fight. If Madrimov runs Ortiz out of the ring, Crawford's stock goes up, his win over Madrimov, where he looked less than himself. I'm going to say, wow, this Madrimov is a heck of a fight. And I've seen Madrimov fight before I fought Crawford. It wasn't the first time. I was somewhat familiar with him. But if he runs Ortiz out of the ring, but if Ortiz beats Madrimov clearly, whoa, that is a red flag. Because don't tell me the fight with Crawford took anything out of Madrimov. It wasn't.
I'm not going to say that.
Right, exactly. So if Ortiz does a better job than Crawford, or does at least as good as Crawford, that's a red flag, considering that was Crawford's last fight. He's been inactive. He's 37. But again, if Madrimov looks sensational, that elevates Crawford, and that convinces me what I felt all along, at least before the Crawford fought Magramov, that Crawford can beat Canelo. And I'm going to go with Crawford to beat Canelo if that scenario takes place, that Magramov, looks impressive in beating Ortiz.
The result of that fight will not change anything about the way I feel regarding Crawford and Canelo. And I will tell you right now, I'm leaning towards Ortiz to beat Magramov because I like his style against him better than Crawford. So I don't think it's going to play much of a factor in it, but we'll see. I'm glad we had that to talk about. Now, let's just address the young man that died. Was it John Cooney?
John Cooney, yeah, featherweight.
Featherweight from the UK.
It was
10-0.
Yeah, it was unbeaten. Got stopped in the 9th round. And when these fatalities occur, Frank, when these tragedies, it happens later in the fight always. If you notice that, guys who get knocked out in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd round survive. But obviously there's head trauma early, and the fight's going on, and it gets worse and worse and worse.
Jack, I just don't think there's anything they can do to prevent it.
And they're dehydrated as well.
That's big.
I don't know what happened in the fight with Cooney, John Cooney here. I don't know, so I'm not blaming anyone. I want to make that. I didn't see a tape of the fight. I didn't hear anything. Maybe everyone did their job exactly the way they were supposed to. But I'm seeing too many fights, and I'm not talking about this one. I just want to emphasize it again. Too many fights where the ringside physicians could easily step in between rounds and call a halt. It's a one-sided fight, and they always have the idea we want to give the fighter every chance to come back. What they're doing is giving them every chance to get killed or suffer serious injury, or have lasting effects that are going to show up later on. It's the same way with the referees. I think I told you this story. Referee who I'm pretty friendly with, he allowed one fighter to get knocked out late in the fight. And that fighter hadn't won a round, but he told me later, I wanted to give the kid every chance to come back. And I said to the ref, you gave him every chance to get killed. That's what you did. And this goes on all the time. The criteria, well, as long as someone could defend themselves and punch back, they let the fight continue. And that's
I don't disagree with anything you said, Jack, but I just don't know what they can do about it. It is fighting, it's combat, and everybody knows the risk. And I just don't know how much more they can take out, where then we just might call it slap fighting. Same thing in the NFL. They've toned that down. The same thing. They don't, across the board, whether it's with practice or whatever, they do everything they can to prevent injuries, but they're just part of the sport. So I don't know if we can do anything about it. It's just a sad part of the sport. And every time I hear about one of these fatalities, Jack, I am not going to lie, but I do question why I have loved this sport for 60 years. And I question myself, and sometimes I feel bad about it, but life goes on.
Well, we were talking about football a little while ago. The long-term effects of playing football are the same as boxing.
Just about.
So what we're going to do, not follow football. But there are ways to deal with it in boxing, especially cutting the certain fight short. Now, I don't know as far as a mercy rule goes, because they say the beauty of boxing, you could lose every round and then turn it around. I understand. But maybe there should be open scoring. And if you fall behind by so much, I think they have that maybe high school baseball or other sports, a mercy rule. It's all over. And if the competitor knows the rules, you can't fall that far behind. Otherwise, fight's over. We'll get used to it. You get the occasional sensational endings in boxing. Like a fight I was at ringside for in Vegas, Diego Corrales over Jose Luis Castillo. That fight should have been stopped. I mean, Corrales spits his mouthpiece out twice. He should have been disqualified. But we see, but he manipulated the rule. But whatever, that's another story. But there are too many fights like that. Now, I'll throw a fight at you like one of your buddies, Tex Cobb. His fight with Larry Holmes, that's a perfect mercy rule fight. Tex Cobb would have fought 50 rounds and taken whatever, anyone would have dished out. What Holmes, anyone else would have dished out. But sometimes, you can't let it go on like that.
I agree with all that. I just don't know what can be done about it. And if I was king of the world, as Bill Conlon used to say, I don't know if I would mess with any more. And Jack, that's a great segue because there was a heavyweight fight this weekend between Derek Chisora and Otto Wallen. And Chisora, but I don't think Wallen's going to fight much more. But Chisora is talking about continuing on. He'll never be the champ, but he can make a living and take care of his family. But what is his life going to be like?
One more fight. He's 41 years old. He beat Wallen decisively, knocked him down twice. How one judge had Chisora only up by 2 points, I don't know. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I had it 118, 108. Another judge had a 117, 109. And that judge was probably maybe more accurate than me. And then another 116, 110, a little on the close side. And then you get a 114, 112. It's like, what?
Yeah, I didn't score the fight, but there was no doubt Chisora was winning.
Right. 41 years old. And Chisora did something that was a lot of fun in the ring afterwards. He had some of his people come in the ring, and he says, I want to fight one of 3 men for my farewell fight, my 50th fight. And he says, you're going to decide, the crowd, how you cheer. They held up Daniel DeBroy's picture. There was a little booing. I don't think anyone cares. DeBroy's Chisora. DeBroy's would beat him easy. Then he holds up Anthony Joshua. There's a lot of cheering. And Usyk. Now, the last 2, you might say Usyk, that's ridiculous. Chisora's long in the tooth. Usyk barely beat Chisora. And when Usyk first started fighting heavyweight, so it's not. But Chisora can't beat Usyk. We agree with that. We're not going to argue with that anymore. But as crazy as it seems, I wouldn't completely count out Chisora against Anthony Joshua.
No, that would be the fight I would try to make.
Right. And Chisora, age 41, he kind of has earned a big farewell fight. He beat Joe Joyce in his last fight, and now he beat Otto Wallen, and it's, like, wow. Chisora is old, he's ancient, but he's very strong, very physically.
He was one of the few guys to take Vitaly Klitschko the distance.
Right. He's paid his dues.
And he fought him. He didn't run. He fought him. He tried to win and carried the whole fight. He's
paid his dues, and I wouldn't criticize you. And Usyk likes Chisora a lot personally, it seems. He visits his dressing room. They asked him a couple of hypothetical matchups, who would beat who. And I forgot who it was, Chisora and someone else. And my head went up when Usyk said Chisora, was his choice. But he likes him a lot, and he would fight him. And
right.
I think Usyk would even want to fight him, say, sure, it would be an honor for me to give him his 50th fight against me. And the guy's earned it. He's earned it. What can you say? He's had some career. But he's the perfect candidate who maybe should have been forced to retire. And I know I'm being hypocritical because he's taken so much over the years.
I know. I hate to see that, but I would like to see him get that pension payday, honestly, because like you said, he's deserved it. He has never ducked anyone. He's never really stunk the place out. He's had some great fights. And, he's been good for the sport as long as he doesn't leave it real bad.
And he came up with a great line once. He's now fighting Chisora for Frank Warren's Queensberry, but he didn't have a bad falling out with Eddie Hearn. He used to fight for Matchroom, and Chisora was asking for, a big payday, and Eddie Hearn was concerned after the fight. He said, "We've sorted you out. Like, we've taken care of you." He says, "Yes, Eddie, I'd rather have caviar instead of fish and chips." So that was a great line.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, he said
That's funny.
Yeah.
What else, Jack? We have Canelo, who signed a 4-fight deal. For a second there, you were going to look like a genius because they were talking about him fighting Jake Paul. I thought, oh, if this happens, Jack called it, and I gave him a hard time. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. He's going to fight William Skull in May, and then he's going to fight Crawford in September, right? That's the first 2 fights.
Canelo is milking things out. Now, out of the 4 fights he's going to have, the one danger fight, to me at least, maybe not to you, is the Crawford fight. He'll fight Skull the first of the 4 fights. That, I don't know how good Skull is, but I got to assume Canelo knows what he's doing, taking him. And it's kind of a gimme in a way, okay?
Okay.
And then he has on his radar like a Chris Eubank Jr., beatable guys, very beatable.
You mean if he beats Crawford?
If he beats Crawford, but we haven't heard what the deal is if he should lose to Crawford. I'm certain Canelo has some type of clause where he gets his money, he gets his rematch, something that Crawford doesn't have. Crawford's going to get a flat payday, a big payday, but he's not going to get any considerations beyond that unless the Saudis offered Crawford a fight with Boots Ennis after that. In the event a fight with Canelo falls through. And I like.
You mean if Crawford beat Canelo?
If Canelo beat Crawford,
I think Crawford retires.
We don't know. You to the gym. He loves training guys in Omaha. He loves interacting. That's his social life.
I don't think he fights Jack. I'm confident to say if Crawford loses to Canelo, it doesn't matter how. But if he loses and it's pretty much, conclusive that he was defeated, I don't think he fights anymore. I think he takes his money and goes back and trains guys and becomes more like a counselor or a consultant and a trainer.
And we talk about red flags, and it's so easy to forget. Edgar Berlanga goes the distance with Canelo, and people say, "Oh, that Berlanga is a good fighter." No, Berlanga, it's Canelo's slippage that allowed Berlanga to go the distance, and Berlanga basically just wanted to go the distance, and then at the end of the fight, in the closing seconds, start throwing flurries, and then feeling, holding his head held up high, and. Notice Berlanga's not going in with anyone with a pulse. He hasn't fought since the Canelo thing.
No, he's styling and profiling. He's another one of them guys that got the big payday, feels good about himself, and now he thinks he's arrived. And he's gonna regret that.
He is not anywhere close to being a top caliber fighter. He's not as good nearly as a Diego Pacheco, for example. He wouldn't fight a guy like that, And
Jack, but in this day and era, though, if he stays active, he'll get another big fight. And there's not that many guys out there that are so great that he can't hang with them.
I shouldn't say this. My buddy Mac, we do the Mac and Jack show. I give Mac all the credit. He prepares the agenda. He does the hard work. I basically, show up. But Mac's the backbone of our show. But Mac wanted to discuss one day, and I refused to. Recently, Keith Thurman returning to the ring. I go, leave me alone, Mac. He's not even worthy of discussion, Keith Thurman. Right? Now, let him have his one fight after 4 years. Let him win that. And then if he signs for a fight within the next 6 months to a year, then maybe I'll be willing to discuss his name. But I refuse to discuss his name, but I'm mentioning it on the show because you gave an example of these guys who they have their fight once in a while.
They don't capitalize off a decent showing.
Well, maybe they can't. Berlanga, I don't know what he's going to capitalize on. He's not going to beat a high caliber fighter.
He's probably 220 pounds now, too.
Yeah.
that's another thing. These guys, they get out of shape, and for some reason or another, they just fall by the wayside. And that's another thing about Crawford. I don't think unless he fights Canelo again, if he won the first time, I don't think he fights again, Jack, because I think he's going to really try to build himself up to be a super middleweight. And after that, it never works out when guys try to come back down, especially when they're in their late 30s.
Frank, I get the feeling with Crawford, it comes down to the money. I think Crawford would fight 3-4 times a year if the money was there. 3 times a year, put it that way. You offer him the big money, he's a stubborn guy. You know who it's like that Andre Ward? These guys hold out. They hold out, they hold out, they hold out. And finally, something falls into their lap. Bernard Hopkins was like that for a while. He just held out until he was going to get what he was worth. But
he really did manage his career well, Jack. I think he did. I think he got everything out of it that he could, especially when he self-managed himself after he had the breakup with Lou DiBella. And I've said this countless times. I've written about it. I think Bernard Hopkins is one of the more intriguing fighters, at least of my lifetime. If you take into consideration his background, going to prison, being a model prisoner, getting out, understanding how important it was to stay in shape, figuring out that he didn't want to sign his life away to promoters. And after he did that and he became a free agent, he kind of managed himself and he did well. And he's one of the few guys that had his biggest paydays at the end of his career, opposed to most guys who fight for peanuts at the end of their career.
Yeah, I sometimes for fun like to think of great fighters and compare them to an athlete in another sport. For example, if Muhammad Ali were a baseball player, he'd be Willie Mays, something like spectacular. I think of something like that. And Bernard Hopkins would be Derek Jeter. There were better players than Derek Jeter, but something about the consistency, the longevity.
Exactly.
So that's, I put Hopkins in that category, as far as
and he did not take beatings, Jack. And I don't think he has squandered his money. I don't think we'll ever hear about him being broke or giving interviews where we can't understand him. I think he's a remarkable case study. I really do. And a unique guy. He likes to talk and he's stubborn, but he takes good notes. And I actually think he'd be a great ambassador for younger fighters to talk to about how to manage your career and instill in their head that it's not the color of your trunks or what corner you are. It's winning. Just win, and everything will come after that. And I have to say, Mayweather is another example who never got out of shape. And even though he squawked about certain things, he still knew at the end of the day, what mattered most was, did I win?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I'm thinking, Bernard Hopkins is someone who I found difficult to deal with myself. I mean, he could be charming and wonderful, but he
doesn't trust anybody.
He wasn't the most dependable guy. But
Jackie trusts no one. No media people except for Bernard Fernandez. That's it.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
I would, Jackie. I'm telling you.
He did something brilliant. I think I told you that story with the glove out in Las Vegas before
right.
Writers' dinner, where a fan came to him with a glove to autograph it, and he said, "I'll autograph it if you give me
for $20."
And the guy gave Bernard the $20. He took it. He autographed the glove, and he said, "Now, when you sell this glove that was signed by the undisputed world middleweight champion," he was champ at the time, he said, "you'll make a lot more than the $20 you just gave me." And Bernard told me later, look, he knew the guy was going to sell the glove, in his opinion, and he wanted the guy to pay his share. And he said the guy got off easy, just gave me a little amount, and this way I could stop off, get a couple of magazines, a couple of bottles of water on the way back to my room. You know, and I
Right.
thought it was some people might say, "Oh, that's disgusting." I thought it was brilliant. I loved
No,
it.
I agree. But that's who Bernard Hopkins is. He is just he's just cut from a different mold. And Jack, I will say this too. You know, Hopkins, since he's retired, we don't talk about him much. But I will say this. The night that he beat Felix Trinidad, I think that was his peak. And I think that Hopkins could live with any middleweight in history of that night. He will not beat
Absolutely.
Robinson. He will not beat Grabby. I don't think he would beat Hagler or Monzon, but they would not run him out of the ring and embarrass him.
Well, Hopkins was once asked, he did a Monzon Robinson comparison, and he said Robinson is a welterweight, even though how would he know, is the greatest of all time, a better fighter than him. But as a middleweight, he said, I think I could beat Robinson at middleweight, but he was a greater fighter than I was. You know, he's taking.
I don't think he beats him at middleweight.
But he said when it came to Monzon, he said I could see myself losing that fight. And recently he said between him and Marvin Hagler,
they both go to the hospital.
Right, but
I don't buy that.
I don't buy that. I think they're both too good to get continuously hit by the other. But I think if they did best 3 out of 5, best 4 out of 7, or whatever, you know, Hopkins and Hagler, no one was going to sweep.
I agree. I've gone back and forth, Jack, who I favor between Hopkins and Hagler. And there was a time where I favored Hopkins because I do think he's the more cerebral fighter. And I think he has some intangibles. But if you ask me today, I think the strain of Hopkins trying to outbox Hagler, I think might tax him, and Hagler would probably get the better of it in the last couple rounds to seal the fight.
Let me ask you about a fight. We haven't brought up this fight at once in our show. He fights for Golden Boy, unbeaten lightweight. He's on that big show in a couple of weeks, Floyd Schoenfeld. He's going against Shakur Stevenson. Are they throwing him to the wolves?
Jack, I have to admit, I haven't seen enough Schoenfeld to make a solid pick or give you a solid opinion on that. I just know that, like, Shakur is the deep end of the pool, and that's a risk.
But he's a boxer. He's a boxer, Schoenfeld. So he fights in the way Shakur does. You know, they're doing a rematch, William Cepeda, Tevin Farmer again. It was a close decision by Cepeda. And then supposedly Cepeda's going to get matched with Shakur Stevenson. I don't see how on earth he beats Shakur Stevenson. I know style-wise Cepeda is very aggressive, throws a lot of punches. That's the way to beat Stevenson. I realize that. I just don't think he's good enough. There's a fight that's interesting this Friday night. Keyshawn Davis. They're building him up to big star. He's fighting Dennis Berinchik for...
who's also undefeated.
Who beat Emmanuel Navarrete, for his WBO,
right?
WBO title there. And Berinchik, was an inspiring victory for Berinchik because when he beat Navarrete early in the day, Usyk had won the heavyweight title, beating Fury. And Usyk sent a message to Berinchik, who was his Olympic teammate, now it's your turn. Talk about pressure. And the same day that Usyk beat Fury, him and his handlers are up watching Berinchik on TV to see could he win the title, a fellow Ukrainian. And I would have loved to have been in the room and seen the reaction. It was a long day for Usyk and company. They were probably high-fiving, going crazy that Berinchik upset Navarrete,
Jack, am I correct? That fight's on ESPN Friday or Saturday night?
Yeah, Friday night, not Saturday. Friday night, Valentine's.
See, that's what boxing needs. They have because we're going to make a pick on that fight, but I don't have a strong feeling either way. There are things about that fight that scare me for Davis.
Wow.
But I'll probably take him.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you're even wavering a bit because Davis, he's got all the tools. Berinchik is a very good, solid fighter, but, he's the type of belt holder very beatable by an exceptional fighter.
Jack, I agree, but that Ukraine mindset, where I know that he'll leave no stones unturned, and I just think having the countrymen behind him and so forth. Look, Davis is going to win, and the style matchup favors him. But I like the guys that I know that are always going to be there with the fundamentals, and they're not going to have the outside distractions. I'm not saying that applies to Davis, but you just don't know. He's 25. He's a man, so it probably won't be the case. He's clearly the more skilled guy, and I'm going to make sure that I catch the fight. I like him to win, but I don't think it's a give me.
Yeah,
he's only had 12 fights either, and his record isn't, it's not beyond reproach either.
No, not at all. I mean, I'm not certain he's going to be a big star. Once in a while you get a guy like a Sugar Ray Leonard type, a Roy Jones. Well, I can jump on the bandwagon very early in their career and say unhesitatingly,
you knew,
be a star. But then you have a Keyshawn Davis, and you realize he could be a big star, but he might not. He's not going to flame out. That I know. But
right.
He might not be more than just a good belt holder going forward. I mean, you just don't know. But he's first got to win the belt and beat Berinchik. And I'll tell you, he's under a lot of pressure because if he loses a split decision, yeah, he could be champion Keyshawn Davis even a year from now, beat another belt holder, maybe have a rematch at Berinchik, but it kind of tarnishes you a little. People aren't looking for Keyshawn Davis to win a very close fight for him to be a star.
No, they're looking for him to be special.
Exactly. That's what he's kind of has to show. I think he can show it in this fight, but I think for Keyshawn Davis to be a star, he has to win this fight with room to spare, be it the distance or stop
conclusively.
Right. And then fight Andy Cruz. Andy Cruz,
which is in the mix,
who beat him 4 out of 4 in the amateurs. And Andy Cruz, as soon as he turned pro, was calling Keyshawn Davis out again. And Keyshawn Davis wasn't anxious to fight him. Keyshawn Davis didn't say these words directly, but he more or less said, "Come on, guy, you beat me 4 out of 4. I'm not anxious to fight you right now. Let's wait. I'll fight you in due time." And
But Jack, go ahead. No, finish your thought.
No, I think when one fighter's beating another 4 out of 4 in the amateurs, he's in the other guy's head no matter what he says.
I can agree with that, but there are so many examples where that doesn't translate to pros. Just like, look, the game yesterday. Jalen Hurts is benched for Tua Tagovailoa in the championship game against Georgia. He never beats out Tua, transfers to Oklahoma. Now they're both in the NFL. Now, look, if Tua was on the Eagles, I still think the Eagles would have won yesterday, but it wouldn't have been as good. And if Hurts were on the Dolphins, I still don't think they're a playoff team, but the Eagles would never trade Hurts for Tua, where I think the Dolphins probably would trade Tua for Hurts. So you just don't know. College doesn't transfer to the NFL, and the same thing with the amateurs. I mean, look at all the amateur fights. Look, Henry Tillman beat Mike Tyson to go to the Olympics. Mathis beat Frazier to go to the Olympics. It's, you just don't know. When they meet as pros, it's completely different. They're 4 or 5 years older.
Frank, a few years later doesn't really mean anything after a while, unless both guys are relatively even in skill. They've progressed the same way. Like we mentioned, Shakur Stevenson, Ramirez beat him in a gold medal match, but Ramirez got upset in his debut, so Stevenson got a lead on him immediately, which he's never relinquished. So no one thinks Ramirez would beat Stevenson if they were matched now.
But Jack, when they meet as pros, it's usually years later, and one of them has either filled out and blossomed, and we find that the other one peaked in the amateurs.
No, you're right. You're 100% correct. I'm saying that had Davis fought Cruz early in his pro career, It wouldn't have been the best fight for him. There's a
Oh,
good
absolutely. Okay, I misunderstood what you said.
No, but now, Davis wants time to go by, and once he beats Barinchik, maybe his mindset will be, yeah, I'll fight Cruz again. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. For example, James DeGale and George Groves. Groves beat DeGale in the amateurs. They had a big rivalry. And then DeGale won the gold medal, but he didn't beat Groves. Then they met as a pros, and Groves repeated the victory over him. Situations vary. You mentioned with Tyson before. Don't we have an anniversary date you wanted to talk about?
Jack, can you believe it's 35 years now? Look, in the States, it was February 10th. In the UK, it was, and in Tokyo, it was the 11th. But it's 35 years today, tonight, whatever, that Buster Douglas shocked the boxing world and beat Tyson 37-0 with 33 knockouts in 10 rounds. Can you believe it's been that those 35 years have elapsed?
Yeah, I'll tell you, that was one of the more shocking upsets in sports history. But again, we have images of guys, and we had created an image of Tyson that he couldn't be beat. Okay, and we have these images of teams in sports. A lot of people wouldn't pick against the Chiefs because of the image, because of what they did before. And but Buster Douglas was a lazy fighter. But for that one night, he was motivated in large part. But even that one night, it kind of still bothers me when he was knocked down in the 8th round. I think he could have gotten up sooner. He barely got up before the 10 count.
Yeah. He hit the canvas with his glove, but he was a little nonchalant about that. Do you remember where you were when you watched the fight?
Yeah, I was home watching it.
I remember my father came over. And we had planned it being a quick fight. And he was asking me about Douglas. And I said, Dad, look, the guy, the last time he fought for the title, he was doing good, ran out of gas and kind of quit. I said, he has a rep of not giving his best. And I think with the pressure of his mother dying and everything, a lot of people thought that afterwards they said it helped him, but nobody said that before the fight, including myself. And after the first round, we had never seen somebody fire back at him like that and hit him and shake him a little bit. And the other thing that stands out was that the crowd, the people, it was like they were at a meeting. They weren't at a sporting event. It was so quiet. And I remember after the fight, Jack, there was a place, let's see, that was 1990. So there was still a lot of nightlife in Cherry Hill at that time. And I remember going out because I wanted to talk about the fight to anybody. And I went to the one place where a lot of my buddies hung, and they came up to me and said, Frank, you didn't predict this fight, but you always said you thought Mike Tyson was a little overrated and he's going to get beat before people start cementing him as an all-time great. And that's the discussion I want to have, Jack, because I vehemently believe that Mike Tyson was overrated in the 80s and a good bit of the 90s. And today, it seems when you talk about him, people rush him off a little too much. And I think today, he's actually underrated.
I don't think so, Frank. We see all these posts with Tyson. Who would have won Tyson Ali? Who would have won Tyson this guy? Tyson that guy? You see that more. You see Tyson's name more than anyone else's, it seems.
But I see him that everybody picking against them.
But the idea of throwing his name out there shows you he's not.
He'll always be a lightning rod, right?
Yeah, and you have to look at the quality of his wins, and you can only beat who's out there, and to stop Trevor Burbick in 2 rounds. How many heavyweights in history could have taken Burbick out that quickly? When
Jack Bernardo Mercado knocked him out in 1. A few years before that.
A few years, but Burbick wasn't at that stage of his career where he was as good, I don't think.
I don't think he was at his peak when he fought Tyson, though. I mean, he lost to Ronaldo Snipes.
He beat Pinklin Thomas to fight.
He won a decision over Thomas. That's how he got the shot.
Pinklin Thomas had substance abuse issues.
He had issues.
Right. Otherwise, Thomas probably would have beaten him. I think Tyson, knocked out Mike Spinks in a round. Are we going to now say Spinks was a puffed up light heavyweight? I mean, because he got stopped by Tyson. And look at his other ones, Razor Ruddock. Razor Ruddock was a top heavyweight, dangerous heavyweight. I mean, Frank Bruno, solid fighter, nothing special, don't get me wrong, but solid. James
Tyson could only fight who was there, Jack.
Not a bad fighter, not exactly elite. But if I'm talking about the Frank Brunos and the Bone Crusher Smiths, I put them in the same league as an Ernie Shavers, for example, and everyone gets excited about Ernie Shavers. And look at, some of his fights afterwards. Carl Williams had a weak chin, but, he took him out in the round.
Jack, when Tyson was in his heyday, I was perceived to be somebody that didn't like him or didn't give him his due. And now I find myself defending him because I hear people say Tyson Fury could beat him, Joshua could beat him, Usyk could beat him. And I just think, Jack, if you take him at his best, I'm not sure. We're talking about his absolute best. I don't know if I could name 10 heavyweights in history, from Sullivan to Usyk, who I would make the favorite over him at his best. And I think sometimes today he doesn't get that credit. You hear guys say, Atlas has been out there saying he's only had 5 fights and he lost every time he had to fight. That's really not true. He has come from behind to win fights. But if he was around today, Jack, there's nobody I would pick to beat him.
Yeah, I mean, you say 10 heavyweights. Are there 5 heavyweights in history who would have beaten Tyson at his absolute zenith? I mean, you could say Ali. You could say Foreman based on the style. I can't say with confidence Liston would have beaten him. I can't say with confidence Lennox Lewis would have beaten him. I can't say with confidence Holyfield would have beaten him. They may have. But if
my life depended on it, Jack, I would take Ali.
Yeah.
I would take Foreman. I would take Holyfield. There might be a couple guys, I think Tua would have beat him, even though he's not an all-time great. I think head-to-head he would have defeated him. But after that, I mean, I would probably favor Joe Louis, but I don't know if I would bet on it. I might even pick Joe Frazier, but I don't think I'd bet on it, and that might be my heart. Well, that's a tough fight.
That's a fight that always makes you wonder. The Frazier of March 8th, 1971 against the best of Tyson. I mean, I can't say with any large degree of confidence who would have beaten who that night. I know.
Well, we know this much. If Tyson doesn't get Joe early, Tyson loses.
Oh, yeah.
He has to get him within the first 2-3 rounds.
But Tyson always, unlike other heavyweights, posed a danger, more so as far as ending a fight at any time quickly, one punch, turning
early.
Look, okay.
Early.
Well, no, it can happen late. As long as the fight's going on, he's going to be dangerous that he could lash out with a punch, even more so than Foreman as far as one punch goes.
I disagree, Jack. I do. I think the further the fight went, the more it progressed. I think the less effective that he became. And I think...
Frank, I agree. I'm just saying he posed that danger as long as the fight was lasting.
Even after 7 rounds?
Look what happened with Buster Douglas. He was getting beat up, and all of a sudden one uppercut. So he was always dangerous to explode with one punch.
I mean, you could say that example. I can come back and say, well, he did lose though, but yes. I think Tyson, from a physical standpoint and skill, I defy anyone who you and I both know who hold an opinion that we value. No way you can come up with 5 heavyweights who were more talented and gifted than Tyson.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it. I mean, Tyson, in a sense, was a media creation, in a sense. But, you know, he backed it up. Even today, the charisma's off the wall. I went to see him at the, I was hoping I'd have a chance to talk to him at the Wellington Mall in Florida. He was doing an autograph signing, Frank, a couple of weeks ago. I get there.
Tyson?
Tyson, well, because word was gotten to his people. You know, the guy writing the book on Michael Spinks is going to be there.
Right.
Quick word. You know, the lines were so long from every direction. It was a madhouse. It was an absolute madhouse. It was insane. You know, I thought Taylor Swift tickets were, you know, they were at the box office, people waiting online. That's how far it was, and that's the mystique of the guy.
Well, for those 3 years, he was exciting as all hell. I mean, to watch fight.
Well, no, I'm saying even now. And
that's carried over.
Everyone who comes up to me when they know I'm involved in boxing, what's the first thing they want to talk about since he fought Jake Paul, the fight with Jake Paul? They don't care about Canelo and Crawford. They haven't even heard of Canelo and Crawford. But everyone's heard of Paul and Tyson, and everyone says the same thing. Tyson drew that fight. Yeah, over here, people talking, everyone is saying Tyson threw the fight. That's what they all believe, even Stallone.
Do they know Tyson's almost 60 years old?
I know, they don't care. Even Sylvester Stallone says to Jake Paul, sends a message, Jake, you should be thankful Mike spared your life. He did what he had to do. You know, collect the money, but he spared your life.
Tyson didn't carry him.
No,
he couldn't get off. He's 60 years old. If Jake Paul would have stood there and said, okay, come and hit me, Tyson might have been able to do something. But as long as Jake is punching back, Tyson he just can't get off. It's like you just can't get off. Like Joe Louis said, your mind can process it, but your body can't execute it. And by the time you see the opening and you want to go, you're either hit or it's gone.
You know, you mentioned Joe Louis. I thought of something the other day. Late on his career, when he lost to Ezra Charles, before he got KO'd by Marciano in his last fight, he wasn't the same fighter, obviously. He wouldn't be knocking guys out. Fights would go to decision. He was still beating top 10 guys. Jimmy Bivens, Rex Lane, you know, whatever. You know, and he was
Jack, the problem was, though, when he fought Marciano, because Marciano was a swarmer, you can't hide and you have to fight. The other guys, he could beat them with his mind a little bit. And even though his physicality wasn't there, he could outbox him and set traps. With Marciano, he's just coming right at him. It's like he's got to fight him off. And he just didn't have the guns in 1951 to fight Rocky off. I mean, Rocky was a terror.
Yeah, that's a mess. So what is going to be more remembered for the date? You said 1951. It was October 26th.
Right.
Louis Marciano fight at the Ali comeback with Jerry Quarry. If you had to
probably Ali,
the biggest event, the biggest fight for every date of the calendar year, and you get to October 26th, I can't think of anything else on October 26th.
I think didn't Ali fight? No, that was October 29th. Jack, just finishing up what I was going to say, though. I think, again, with Tyson, because I've had these conversations, I think Tyson in the 80s and early 90s was a little bit overrated. I think he's underrated today, and he's without a doubt one of the top 5 skilled heavyweights of all time. And if you have to rank them as far as the greatest heavyweights of all time, he's clearly in the top 12 and maybe even the top 10. If you take everything in totality, ability, one-loss record, skill, longevity, the whole bit, he's between 10 and 12.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we can carry this on next week, Frank, because Tyson is a complex individual.
All right, Jack. We'll watch the fights on Friday night. Talk about it next Monday. Until then, see everybody.